Hello! There's kind of a setup going on here. I don't know if you could tell. It's not a setup. I just had my assistant come in here, throw some shit together. But there's a theme over all of it. We got a bunch of old shit. There's a 360, an old tape recorder. That shit's old. We got a deck of Yu-Gi-Oh cards, a pyramid, and some old books up there. And among all the relics here on the desk, you might have noticed as well a little brown paper bag. Well, yes, these are normally really good for drug deals and things of the like. This is not filled with drugs. It's actually filled with a secret surprise tool that will help us later. I got a dead dude's head, just, fitting into the theme, as is, of course, the topic of today's video, little piece of content for all of you lovely people out there. We are going to be talking about this big centerpiece, Gears of War, which, like everything else on this table, by this point is a fucking antique. This game cannot fucking escape me. No matter how hard I try, no matter how hard I run, it comes back and it drags me back down. No matter how hard I fight, claw, kick, scream, blow my rape whistle, it comes back for me eternally. But somehow, this series, no matter how horrible, how mismanaged, how completely forgotten in the dirt by Xbox it gets, still remains my favorite piece of media, kind of, somehow. Gears of War is a little quirky. It's a bit wild. It can be truly horrific if you know just where to look. Like, holy fuck, he really thought that this was a good idea. But beyond that, it's fucking whack. Tricking people at 2005's E3 with a beautiful trailer, promising a game of untold secrets and beauty just beneath the surface. Gears of War has gone off of that little Better Call Saul menagerie into, I don't know, probably the least forgettable Xbox IP, although at the same time the most relished from the old school 360 days, outside of Halo, of course. So today we're going to take a little look on the Gears of War series in whole. 2006 comes around and the games are released. Gears of War Emergence Day for the Xbox 360. Big buff men, chainsaw guns, absolutely no depth, no character, no anything. Some pretty solid music, some pretty fun gameplay for 2006, some stellar, animation, all that jazz for 2006 on the Xbox 360, which was only a year old at this point, I'm pretty sure. But the atmosphere and the kind of mysteries around the game, along with the kind of semi-inventive third-person cover-based shooting mechanics, is all that really carried the game at this point, and still kind of carries the games going forward. But for now, that's all it was. There was no character development. There was no nuance or anything beyond that. There were seeds for it, but it wasn't there. Some characters would get more love in comics and books, Marcus especially, and then some characters would be kind of two-faced, like Baird, where he's just sort of a sarcastic asshole in the games, and then in the books and comics, he's just straight up hates women. Like, Reddit would love this guy. Baird and women, nah. Ops on sight. I'm telling you, that's just how it goes. I'll be honest. I have a little bit of a confession to make. I'm not up there with the 2006 veterans of this game. See, at the time, I was still shitting in diapers. I was learning how to walk. I was taking on the gang wars in California. I didn't have enough time for video games, let alone Xbox or Gears of War. I wasn't a part of that first wave of people to come through and enjoy this game on launch. I've seen people who have. I've heard their stories. Their war stories, if you will. And, most of it is clouded by nostalgia. I'll give them that. It's, almost 20 years ago now. Holy fuck, dude. It's so old. But at the end of the day, I wasn't there for the prime time Gears of War experience. I just missed out on that whole train because by the time that my brain was capable of complex thought, Gears of War 5 was out. Or Gears 5, depending on how you believe Rod Ferguson. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. That's neither here nor. Main point being... I'm sorry, Wall. Main point being that I wasn't there for the mainstay of the series. My first Gears of War game was actually Gears of War 2 in 2008, 2009, right about there, when I was about, just learning how to walk. I got to play Gears of War 2 with my dad, my papa, padre, father, whatever you want to call it. And let me tell you, my Dominic Santiago missed more shots than Shadowheart. That companion fucking sucked. Let me tell you, no bueno. Gears of War 2, I will say, for somebody who kind of played it when it came out, I wasn't a part of the community or anything going on around the game at the time, but I was definitely there for it. And Gears of War 2 is almost identical to the first. It very much looks the same. It still doesn't have any character development or anything going on. There's mysterious stuff happening in the world, and Dom's character arc with his wife, which is very emotional, but there's no, how do you say, character to it. The writing is very action movie, more so than like an actual character drama, like most people talking about the game would lead you to believe. There is no relationship between Dom and Maria. We know that Dom and Maria were husband and wife, and they loved each other. We know that Dom was looking for Maria for a long time, and he was really sad when he couldn't find her, and even sadder when he found her and she was fucked up. And that is, truth be told, a sad story. That kind of sucks. But there's not a whole lot there. The emotions behind it is just, it's on a different level. It's harder to get involved with the emotions of the character versus the emotions of the circumstance, right? On top of that, you got all the mystery shit going on. There's stuff with the Lambent that plays into the next game, and stuff with Mira being kind of a human and kind of knowing Marcus's dad, which is played off as a mystery, except for that mystery is never solved. It's kind of fan-fictionized in Gears 5 and Gears Tactics to make a little bit more sense, but Gears of War does something that, when I first heard about it, I thought was neat. It was kind of unique. Basically, the way that the narrative director for Gears 5 and kind of the new age Gears of War games from the Coalition comes out, the way they put it was that they work on Gears of War's lore and world in a kind of negative space way, where they have things that we know are true. Like, we know Marcus Phoenix is a person. We know his dad is a person. We know his son is a person. We know Anya is a person. We don't know anything about Anya's family, outside of, obviously, Helena, some other things going on. But in some stories, more classical written books and stuff, like if you look at Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire, or Lord of the Rings, or hell, even other things in the medium like Mass Effect, there's a lot that they tell us about the world to flush it out and make it feel more real, more relatable, more personable. Gears of War basically does the opposite of that. They do whatever the fuck they want, however they want, and you're stuck with it. Because negative space, brah. Next on the list was Gears of War 3, though. And let me tell you, in 2011, this was my first Gears of War launch that I was well and cognitive to be able to even understand that it was happening. And it was happening 2 days before my birthday, when I was turning 9 years old. I was way too young to play these games. But let me tell you, I was fucking pumped. And when I got my hands on it, Gears of War 3 was, and still is, a pretty solid video game. You got the fucking Retro Lancer charging into bitches. You got Beast Mode, which gives you the power of a berserker. It was an epic thing that just did not stop rolling. The Lambent seemed like a real threat. All the stuff with the Locusts made a little bit more sense. And everything in it was just pushed up to the nth degree from the previous games. In all of the best way. Horde was bigger. Beast Mode was awesome. And it never returned. But the campaign was epic. We got Rom Shadow. They allowed us to play as the main bad guy from Gears of War 1, who is still fucking badass. As much as I'm going to rag on Gears in this video, that was still nice. Gears 3 finally gave us some actual character development. Like, we get to see Marcus have an emotion that's not, We get to see Coltrane interacting with his past. We get to see Dom kind of go over and reflect on the choices he's had to do, you know, the old wife. We get an actual meaningful moment that still makes gamers cry to this day. It's kind of a meme. It's a whole podcast episode on the Chaos Continuum, but Dom dies. There was actually a lot of thought put into the story that was almost completely absent from the previous games, that elevated Gears from just being a musclehead shooter with chainsaw guns that is totally not a Warhammer 40k into totally not Warhammer 40k with a little bit of tears on the side, with a little bit of emotion and vigor moving through its veins. Now, would it stay that way? No. But it did stay that way just long enough for Ice-T to drop some bars on the franchise. And from here on out, Gears of War kind of goes the Star Wars route, and I'm not even fucking kidding you. Next up, we have a prequel series that kind of sets up a little bit of the conflict that happened before the main games and the main conflict of the main games themselves. If that makes sense. It's a prequel. It's a fucking prequel. It was a really bad prequel that changed a lot, and it specifically took the things that made the original games good and got rid of that. Fuck that shit. A prequel that was so bad, everybody universally hated it. Until, of course, a series of sequels came out that just so happened to make the main character the granddaughter of the big bad from the original trilogy, even though it makes little to no sense. But they made these sequels that were so bad that people saw this horrific prequel, which is still bad, by the way. It's fun to play with friends, but like it's still a bad game for many reasons. But they made sequels that are so bad, or at least perceived to be so bad by the hardcore bleeding red fan base of the series, that people looked back on those prequels and said, you know what? Now, a lot of what gave Gears its identity, at least to my best understanding, is Cliffy B himself, Cliff Bleszinski. I really hope I didn't butcher that. But this is the man who you might know from all of those promotional images from the original Gears of War games where he was just posing with the Lancer with a hairdo that you could only ever exist with pre-2010. But this is the guy that was in charge of the Gears of War games up until Judgment failed and they sold it to Xbox. Then he left to do a Lawbringers thing that the best thing to come out of that was the song by JT Music, so I think that says all that it needs to. And you have a guy who so hard, for so long, tried to say, no, I'm more than Gears of War, I am my own guy. And then Lawbringers crashed and burned. Gears of War, still semi-relevant. I mean, it's more relevant than Lawbringers, which is fantastic, I guess. And now you'll see all of these headlines and articles of former Gears of War creator Cliffy B has something to say about the series that he hasn't been involved with since 2013. Because even though he hasn't been involved in a long time, and his kind of internal ideas about the series, at least from things that I've heard, and you'll probably see on online forums, a lot of the things that he pushed for in the Gears games are not unlike what we actually got in Gears 5, the one that everyone says is really bad and Cliffy B should come back to the series to fix. It just goes to show you that people aren't really paying attention to who makes what decisions throughout a game. And then you have, Cliffy B going out, doing all these articles, and you get shit like this. Now, I don't really play favorites when it comes to the of war titles because, let's be honest, they're both fucking awesome. Let me rephrase that. They're both decently solid games, decently solid franchises that have more good than bad, I believe. But saying in order to fix Gears of War, you should just make it like God of War kind of feels like a cop-out to me. Like, that's like saying to make Starfield better, just make it like Baldur's Gate 3. You know what I mean? It's kind of like he's just saying in order for Gears of War to be a good game again, you just make a good game. Come on, how hard can it be? Like, what? Come on. If this Barlog guy can do it, why can't we? Why can't we just put that together? Why is that, not possible, guys? Now, when Gears of War was sold to Microsoft for good, it wasn't all downhill. We still had a fair amount of the original developers working at the Coalition, formerly Black Tusk Studios, working on Gears of War now. Their first project, of course, being Gears of War Ultimate Edition, which is just Gears of War with a very, very nice coat of paint on it. And there's not much more I can say about it other than the fact that it looks really nice. For a game that came out in 2015, it's still, I just am barely noticing the fact that it's kind of falling apart by next-gen standards. But the fact that it took 8 years for that game to kind of start to look outdated gets an A in my book. But we still did have one of the biggest heads of Gears on the franchise, Rod Ferguson. God, why do they have such long last names? Rod Ferguson, who you might know as the guy really going on about truth.org on that, that one stage, and the guy with the ginger beard who just shows stuff off, and he kind of looks like he's uncomfortable and just like he's there because he has to be, but he really does not want to be, He was still there, at least up until a year of Gears 5's lifespan, after it kind of was on fire and falling apart. He ditched, and he joined the Diablo team, which, as of about 2 months ago, has now been bought out by Microsoft again, so that he's back as a part of the Microsoft ecosystem, which I think that Microsoft only really did buy Activision Blizzard so that they could force Rod Ferguson to work on muscly chainsaw dudes for the rest of his days. Unfortunately, with the buyout, though, in the new kind of studio, we got a lot of not great people, like Dana, who is not really important. He's just sort of around. He's just a dude that exists in the realm of Gears. He was a part of the community team, and he didn't know what consoles the Halo series came out on, and he tried to correct one of the authors of the Bloodlines book about what happens in the book. Not great, but there was definitely, a bit of a mixed bag at the studio. And that's how we ended up with two, closer to 3.5 games that were kind of all over the place. Gears of War 4 was a semi-spiritual successor to Gears 3. It kept a lot of the same infrastructure, gameplay, everything like that. The biggest changes it made was going back to a 2-person campaign and horde mode, adding in different modifiers and classes and stuff like that, and it made it almost more into a more active thing with actual objectives and stuff like that were really cool and really kind of interesting, especially for Gears, that kind of spiced it up over the classic nothing but you and a gun from the old Horde modes. And then, of course, we got the big one. Gears Pop. Yeah, this is my favorite fucking mobile game of all time. It is literally, I mean, it's a Clash Royale clone with Gears of War characters in pop form thrown over the top of it. But I mean, it's got a lot going for it, you know? Here, hold on. Skull. What does Gears Pop have going for it? In all seriousness, the next big game was Gears 5, which is kind of all over the place. It rides the Gears of War 2 nostalgia pretty damn hard. We got everything from going back to New Hope to discovering there was a secret evil scientist lair beneath the concentration camp, where even more evil scientist stuff was happening, to another big-ass worm that just sort of comes out of nowhere, to Kate killing Reyna at the end of the last game. Didn't matter at all because she's just being puppeted by a corpse thing. So Locust have necromancy now, kind of? It's all very weird. And the team at the studio from this point on just kind of gotten more and more fragmented. We, for a short time, got splash damaged. They came in and they did Gears Tactics, an XCOM style tactics game in the Gears universe, which is fucking solid. No microtransactions, no anything. It's just, you get it, you play it, you beat it. That's it. It's a good, solid, classic feeling game. It's awesome. You should play it. It's not bad. And then you have Gears 5, which, as I mentioned, you have people like Dana who don't know where they are. You have the previously mentioned narrative director saying things about the Locust when people were asking, say, like, the Leeches, they were in the old comics, but shouldn't they have died with all the other Locusts? Or why did the Scions have kind of the same powers that the Cantus do? Is it something about their religion or something about their DNA that allows them to do that? And their answer was, well, you know, we needed an enemy to do this, so, like, we took it out and we put it in. And there's no thought whatsoever into why or how that works. It's just, we put it there because we said. Let me tell you, the best piece of advice you could ever have a reason for everything that you do. This kind of goes doubly for stories, right? Like, if you're writing a story, if you're writing something and you have someone do something, have a reason for them to do that thing, or have a reason why that thing exists. Don't have it exist, and when somebody asks why, I felt like it. You know, I think we just needed it. It doesn't work for solid narrative construction. It's not good to build a house on a shaky foundation, and Gears 5 kind of just has a dirt mound. But they're still trying to put up a Walmart anyways. And all of the discussion around the game didn't get any better. Everybody said, give it back to Cliffy B, give it back to Epic. First of all, that's not how games work, right? Like, Billy Mitchell at one time was the greatest gamer of all time. Now, he's a fucking joke. Same thing kind of goes for Cliffy B. I don't mean to be too mean or to rag on him too hard. He's not a fucking joke like Billy Mitchell is. He's just not the same guy he was in 2010. And that's okay. He's moved on to other things. He's doing whatever. I think he's given up on video games, unless it's Gears of War related, because he will ride that until he dies and talk about Ryan Reynolds playing Baird all day long. Please, God, don't let it happen. I do not want Ryan Reynolds in a Gears of War movie, because it's not a Ryan Reynolds type of movie. I'm just saying, like, you can make a comedy Gears of War movie. Please don't put Ryan Reynolds in as bad. He just doesn't. It doesn't fit what it is. Unless you make Ryan Reynolds a raving misogynist like he is in the Anvil Gate book, don't do it. Don't. Please, don't. The issue with these statements is it's not so cut and dry, right? Like, for the last almost 8 years now, ever since the Ultimate Edition was released, people have been asking begging, fucking wanting a Gears of War Marcus Phoenix collection or Gears of War 2 remastered or whatever the hell have you, right? Go on any of Gears of War's social media accounts, and whenever they do post, which is not often because it's kind of a dead franchise right now, whenever they do post, it's met with 100,000 comments of people saying, Gears of War 2 remaster, when? Gears of War 2 remaster, please? Gears of War 2 remaster, now! If you go into any Gears of War circles online, you're going to find probably one of 3 reactions, or statements, whatever you call it, pretty much all the time. You will find Gears of War Marcus Phoenix Collection, when? Gears of War 5, bad. And lastly, I'm new to Gears of War, I don't like the first one, how are the next ones going to happen? And then, the fan base as it is, fuck off. Which is the bad, I hate Gears of War 1, honestly, as a dude who's spent far too much money on Gears of War stuff, I hate Gears of War 1. I don't hate it, but it's definitely not anywhere near my top 100 games of all time. But I really like Gears of War 3 and 4 and 5. I know you probably fucking hate me at this point. I don't care. But, just because somebody hates the first game, they might like the future ones. That's not how that works. But the Gears of War fan base is incredibly just... How do I put this? Oh, you said we need the secret surprise. Well, I think it probably means that this has something to do with our current topic. What's in here? Oh! It's a gas mask, because I'm going to need it, because the Gears of War fan base is so incredibly toxic. I'm telling you, when I say toxic, I mean corrosive, melting titanium toxic. It will make you regret the choice of life. Unironically. So, before I go any further into completely dogging on the Gears of War community and the people who rant about this game for hours and hours on Reddit or the official Discord, or used to be the forums before it got axed because nothing Gears of War related exists anymore, let me just prepare for the inevitable, because I know it's going to be fucking bad. Now, are we clear? Are we satiated? Are we knowing that I am taking jabs in good faith? No? Well, we're going to go anyways. And if you said yes, thank you for being a rational and sensible human being who knows what the fuck a joke is. Alright, we good? We good. So when you talk about the Gears of War community, it does boil down into those 3 things, and a few others, especially when it comes to talking about Gears 5, keeping with the Star Wars comparisons. A lot of the things you'll see about Gears 5 is ew women, because Baird is just a plague, apparently spreading it far and wide to the entirety of people who play this game. Not that Kate is a bad character. There's not even people who go that far. They say, why am I playing as a woman? And that is just... That's where it is. So, they're a very, very small minority. Don't get me wrong, but, the fact those people exist at all, and that is all you have to say why you hate Gears 5, I'm just saying. But among the Gears community, you get a lot of people who are very much elitist in their own way. They're very much in that boat of, you are going to like the first 3 games, and if you disagree with me on any slight little thing, fuck you, fuck everything you've ever done, you don't deserve to exist as a human being, and be gone with you. I just said be gone with you in a fucking 2024. New year! That being said, they are passionate fans, at the very least. There are some awesome people, like a certain cosplayer you might have seen a lot of. I found him on TikTok, and I follow him on Instagram and stuff like that. I'm forgetting his name right now, but he's right here. You should check it out. It's really fucking awesome. There are a lot of awesome people in this community as well. I mean, look at yours truly. I've been making a random assortment of Gagglefuck Gears of War content for the last half a year now, and we host Nexus Nights, which is a weekly community kind of get people together to play video games and fuck around for a few hours on a Sunday evening because it's fun. While there's also some really, really not kind people in the community, there's plenty to go around that is nice in its own right. Outside of the chainsaws, Gears of War has definitely followed Warhammer in the way that the community is very one note. There is a handful of jokes that are just recycled. You have loads of people who talk about how much they hate Gears of War 5, and all they do is play Gears of War 5. And granted, before anyone comes for me, I'm not immune from this. I used to do my little fair amount of trolling on the Gears of War forums. But in my defense, I was 16 years old when those were popping. You are a 39-year-old man with a mortgage, wife, and kids, and you're getting wrought up about a 3-viewer Twitch stream about a game that has not had an update since 2020. The Gears of War series is very loosely strung together. It is all manner of things, some kind, some very not kind. It is very much the best, worst game I've ever played, and it is, to me, it is the epitome of nostalgia when it comes to a fan base, because Gears of War doesn't have a whole lot of positives. If you look at the games, I don't think any of them have more positives than negatives. The first 3 games are fairly, good on that mark. Gears of War 1 and 2's biggest issues come from the fact that they're just old enough to drive. Gears of War 3's biggest issues are mainly just server issues and stuff like that, which also just comes from the age. Gears Judgment just sucks ass. Gears 4 did a lot of cool, interesting things, and then it did a lot of shit things. Gears 5 didn't know if it wanted to be a good game or a bad game, so it kind of just switched between the two on a week-by-week basis. All in all, I hope this gave you a little bit of understanding onto the entirety of Gears as it stands now in 2024. I don't know how I've spent so much time on this franchise, and there's a lot of stuff I could say to kind of move it from my chest and into the camera, but I'm going to refrain from doing that because nobody wants that. It had the advantage of coming out at a time when better games were not around, because we have games that are story-focused that manage to kick Gears of War in its fucking teeth. We have games that are shooter-focused, third-person shooter-focused, that are just so much more engrossing to play. To me, Gears of War's biggest sin is the fact that it kept going. Now, I think Gears of War could have experimented and tried different things. I'm not saying it had to go the God of War route of trying to be a super serious story-based thing, even though Gears of War has enough groundwork and foundation in the stories and lore that it does have to tell a story like that. But we could have gone for a, stranded Resident Evil style game where it's actually a horror gothic type thing like what Gears of War 1 originally intended for. We could have gotten more like Gears Tactics, a tactical style type game, maybe even a Halo Wars version set during the Pendulum Wars. There is so many opportunities for a series like this to go out and expand and branch out, and they almost did it. They did Gears Tactics, and then it just silenced. Recap: Gears of War games, kind of good, kind of mostly bad. Community, kind of good, mostly shit. Developers, incompetent. Music, pretty fucking good. I will say so myself. This vinyl, one of my favorites. Gears of War is fucking whack. Your fucking hat.